Hello, bonjour, and dumelang. Welcome to Sshaba. Are you listening? I am your host, Moronga Mosetli. You've seen me on these streets every once in a while. This is a podcast that is brought to you in collaboration with the French Embassy of Botswana by Mebala Youth Studios. We're going to spend 10 episodes discussing everything about women. Where are we? Who are we? What are we doing? And what are our issues? I am joined today by my co-host, TK. His real name is Takuzwa, but I will let him introduce himself. And then I also have a very, very special guest representing the French Embassy, Miss Soukeyna Fall. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me today. Before we properly jump into the meat, let me let the people know who TK is. Can you tell them, sir?
Dumelang. Good morning to you all. My name is Takuzwa, and I am a trauma counselor by profession, and I am based at Mebala Youth Studios, where I offer free counseling services. In the same time, I'm also here at the podcast because it is something that I'm very passionate about, especially in the counseling world. We see that women face a lot of issues and men are never anyway involved in these conversations. We try to distance ourselves. So I'm also here to also just represent some of the men that are ready to have these conversations. Yes.
Nice. I like that. Gentlemen out there, when we're talking about women's things, we don't mean to exclude you. It's not like we're saying you're not part of us. We're just trying to gather ourselves as women as well. And now on to Soukeyna. Hi, Soukeyna. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for having the time to come join us today. May I ask, just for the people so that they get to know about you, who are you and what exactly is it that you do?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Soukeyna Fall. I'm the civil society attaché at the French Embassy in Botswana.
Okay. What exactly does that mean, like civil society attaché?
That means I am running the programs in cooperation with civil society representatives. So it can be things like Bokongo. We have a program in support to women's socioeconomic empowerment. We're working with Mebala on this great project.
Yes.
And so this is basically what I do, amongst other things.
Oh, okay. That's very cool. I actually didn't know that embassies may have sort of like a department that would directly deal with civil society, which means they are directly linked to the people that are struggling or marginalized in a society and are now able to, I guess, indirectly help through that way.
Yeah, actually, support to civil society is a priority of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's very important to cooperate with them because they're the one that are close to the field, the ground, to people's realities.
Yeah.
So it's something we very strongly value, and particularly to tackle issues like GBV and women's socioeconomic empowerment, you have to know really what's happening, and that's where their actions is so valuable.
Yeah, okay. I like that. I really, really do. I hope all the other embassies out there also have an office that is working with civil societies. I'm not saying you should. I'm just suggesting that if there's any work you want to do in the community, perhaps the best way is to also go the French embassy's route and connect with some of our civil societies. And now, because some people might not know, we do have a lot of people who are in rural areas. What is the French Embassy and what exactly does it do as an organization?
Sure. So the French Embassy in Botswana represents French interests in Botswana. It's France in Botswana, but also supports cooperation between France and Botswana on a wide diversity of topics. Civil society cooperation is one of them, as I was saying, or support to women's socioeconomic empowerment, but also digital, agriculture, sustainable tourism, and so much more.
Are we similar in those ways? Like, because I hear you talking about a lot of different things that Botswana does do. Like, we are a tourism country, so of course we'd be interested in sustaining that tourism. At the same time, a couple of years ago, we were ranked the world's highest rate, the world's top rape capital. So I'd like to imagine there's maybe some similar socio-economic issues that lead to GBV and other things. Are those parallels we have as two countries?
I think the issue of gender inequality and GBV is global. It's something you see in all the countries from everywhere in the world, any types of geographies, continents. So, of course, it includes both of countries, but I'm very happy that we have this type of discussions, of programs, of policies, like our international strategy for gender equality as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to tackle those issues and really break the taboos and work on it.
Oh, okay. Can I ask you to just touch a little bit on the kinds of things that have happened in France or are happening in France? I studied French in high school, and it was the first language I learned after English, before my mother tongue. I'm not saying I'm proud of this. It just happened to be available. And I learned a lot about French culture that suggested there's a lot of freedom in the autonomy of being an individual. So like there's a tiny click in my head that's like, well, they're free, they're open, they understand themselves as individuals. And then to hear that the GBV is, I guess, yes, it's globally prevalent, but for me personally, also hearing about it in France, having come from that background, is like, wait, really?
Yeah, our national motto is Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, which means liberty, equality, and brotherhood or sisterhood. And of course, this is, the goal. And of course, this is what the law says, that everyone's equal. But then in all societies, of course, you have those challenges that you have to tackle. As I was saying, it happens in Botswana, happens in all the countries, in France. And those are issues we all need as societies to face and to try and take and really work on. No country is perfect. No country can say, I'm better than you. So we're all working around those issues, and it's important that we do it together.
That is very true. I guess it doesn't really matter that the country as an organization or as an entity, even if the government is saying, we have to work on this, we have to fix this, we have to put this together, it doesn't necessarily mean that the actual people in the society are following the rules. We all know personally what issues we're facing at home. We all know what our economic struggles are, our social struggles, our mental struggles even. And perhaps you as a person at home are not necessarily able to follow what the government is asking of you. And this is partially why we want to have this conversation. And we're hoping that by the end of episode 10, you and your neighbors and your family are going to sit down and have these conversations, and then we can teach our children, teach our children's children. You know the deal. The whole idea is that we turn it into a snowball and it gets nice and big. We will be back on Sshaba. Are you listening? In a few. Welcome back to Sshaba. Are you listening? I am still here with my great people, and we are having the most fun at the Village Studio. Anyway, we're going to continue with our conversation. Before we get into what this podcast actually is about, Soukeyna, personally, are there any women's issues that are close to your heart that you get to champion through the work you're doing, especially since, you're working with civil societies and you are seeing some of these things that are happening in the country firsthand?
I haven't been there for so long, but,
okay.
In general, those issues you can find everywhere, as I said. So I'm very happy that as part of, for instance, the program we have with Bokongo, we are supporting women's socioeconomic empowerment. It's very important when you're trying to reduce GBV, because a lot of women that find themselves in situations where they're vulnerable don't have the means to sustain themselves. And I think it's important to get to the roots of some of those problems, and that's a way to do that. And then everything related to this, the roots and then the consequences. So another important thing that I hope we're going to support is education around that, advocacy around those issues, which is the thing we're doing here, right?
Yes.
So it's great that all those actions we're doing, they all come together to support this common goal of socioeconomic empowerment of women, and of GBV. Well, trying to support the reducing of GBV. So this is all very exciting. I'm very excited to see how this podcast comes out, to see how our program with Bokongo, what organizations we end up supporting. A lot of them are very creative in the way they want to support this issue.
We do like that very, very much. Especially the part where you talked about the socio-economic empowerment for women. I do know that is a big issue in Botswana. I've seen a lot of women stay in very, very bad relationships because the main concern is, how am I going to feed myself? How am I going to feed my kids? Would that be something you see a lot of in your patients? I don't want you to undress your patients, but is that a common theme in the GBV space?
Yes, it seems like most of the people who actually stay in relationships is because they don't have any form of financial freedom or any form of financial literacy. So it becomes a thing of, but he provides for me. And it becomes more of a trauma bond where someone sees a positive out of a negative or a toxic relationship to say, but at least I'm surviving. My kids are going to school. I can enjoy for my children. So it's almost like people stay not because they want to stay or they need to stay. They stay because there's also some certain perspective that we as outsiders cannot see. It's easy for us to judge and say, this woman is staying in an abusive relationship. Why can't she just pack her things and go? Where can she go to?
Yeah.
You see, so having such platforms where we see such a strong, confident woman coming to speak and talk about the issues even that are beyond borders, to say we're also experiencing this, and this is how we are trying to deal with it, and we see that also Botswana is trying to deal with it in a certain way. So we're also here to try and support them. Giving support, when you support someone, it doesn't mean that you're perfect.
That's true.
So it means that you also see that, okay, here is where I can also bring something that might be lacking, or they can also teach me something. So through each other's experiences, this is what I'm also hoping from this podcast, that our viewers can also learn from our own lived experiences, as well as a combined experience of now coming from an expert level, not from a social level. So I'm hoping that our listeners are also going to be tuning in for every single episode.
Yes,
Whilst you
please.
still have me, Morongo, on this one, I just want to follow up with Soukeyna. You mentioned breaking taboos, and you mentioned inequalities, and you also mentioned one of your mottos being equality, right? So at what point did you see this as your calling to say, I want to also take a stance in the civil society work and also bring some form of contribution?
I think, well, as a woman in society, you're faced with a lot of challenges, and even more so when you're a woman and from certain backgrounds. You can be from a certain gender identity, ethnic, religious background, and so on. And a lot of those challenges, they really shape you and shape your determination, I would say, to act on some issues that can be there in every society, as I just said. So I think that as gender minority, or you're always very awoken to those things. Sometimes it's later in life, but for me, it was quite early. I also have a political science background, so I have an analytical perspective on things. And I've also volunteered in an NGO that was working on FGM, on women that are subjected to GBV, providing them multidimensional support, because it can't just be health, right? It can't just be social. It can't just be police. It needs to be all together, so that there's like an integrated approach to these issues, and really that there's a sustainable answer to these. So yes, it's issues that are very close to my heart and career, and I hope to continue working on this as part of this program with the French Embassy.
Okay, so that's actually wonderful. So I'm then just going to ask you this from your personal perspective as well as from the French embassy's perspective. What does Sshaba mean for you as well as for the embassy?
From what I understood, because I don't speak Setswana, but it's very important that we have Setswana, that there's linguistic representativity here, right? So Sshaba means, are you listening, right? Or it's interact. Please explain to me.
So the Setswana term Sshaba refers to the land, the nation, all of the Botswana
yes,
here.
right. That was the one.
But at the same time, Sshaba can be world. So yeah, the
It's
idea.
community, are you listening? Everyone,
Yes,
are you
yes,
listening?
everyone,
Yes.
are you listening? The idea was to just call everybody.
The idea was for it to be captivating, I think, to be really, to catch people's attention.
Yeah.
If she validates what I'm just saying.
Yes. No,
I
that
don't know
is
if
true.
I should be asked this question.
We did. So at the time, we did think about, we want Botswana to listen. We want French people to listen. But it's a podcast. Between Botswana and France, there's like 60 countries. And then there's the western side and the eastern side of the world. Okay, I have that wrong, guys. Please don't go to school and tell people that this is the western side. It's the other way around. We have the eastern side of the globe and the western side of the globe. And we realized that everywhere, even when I was a child, I was hearing about all sorts of issues in Asia, in Russia, in Africa with different women's issues, in America. I didn't understand then, but the idea overall was to say, okay, if we're trying to talk to all the women and all the men, ka Setswana, ga se gore re bua le setšhaba. And I think the best loose way to translate that is it not that we're speaking with the world?
Yeah.
So world,
it's also
Sshaba.
inclusive of other gender identities, even.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody, are you listening? Are you there? Do you understand where you are today and what your global context is, what it is to your neighbor? And are you working together? Are we together? Are we moving forward, or some of us are still somewhere behind? That was my understanding. And now that Soukeyna has given me hers, I think we are on the same page.
Okay.
Are you there?
I'm there, all the way from Zimbabwe. I'm there.
Okay. What are we hoping to achieve with this podcast?
So we want to have these kind of dynamic, constructive discussions, including, as you rightly mentioned before, every gender identities, and just, to open that space. It's a shame that sometimes gender issues are tackled in a sensationalist way, which is not really sometimes, I wouldn't say respectful, but sensitive to some of those issues, because it's very serious issues that need to be tackled, very sensitively. And so we're trying to create this safe space of discussion, where we can, just constructively contribute to the conversation.
Yes.
So that's what I hope we're going to manage to do.
Yes, I agree. I hope we pull the same thing off. I hope we are able to impress you with our different conversations. We have I wanted to say a dozen, but I'm lying. There's actually 9 guests remaining. So we have 9 guests remaining, and they are women from all sorts of walks of life. There's a lecturer in there. There's a sportswoman in there. There's a woman in media in there. There's a woman who's dealing with politics. She's not a politician, because we're about to go vote and we don't want people feeling some type of way. But she does work in the political sphere, and we are trying to make sure that everybody is represented in this conversation. We have Soukeyna, she is so great. And then we have these other wonderful people in studio that are not going to show their faces just now, but they are also very, very amazing. And we are hoping that as you watch our show, you can ask questions, you can talk to your friends, you can come back to us and say, well, we think you misrepresented this issue. I see it like this. And then maybe, when we're done, we'll be able to do a season 2 and get more insights into what's going on globally. This is Sshaba. Are you listening?